joining us for this roundtable discussion, which is entitled Exiting the Thesis. So I guess hopefully we're going to cover things that are useful for people who are pre and during their doctoral programs, and if anyone's completed a PhD and has exited, then it's still great to have you guys along and share your wisdom with those that are still going through that process. And exiting the thesis is one of the most critical parts, actually, of your whole kind of academic journey. So I think hopefully it'll be a really useful session for you. I'm joined by Helen, who's co-chair and got some amazing points to talk and facilitate the discussion. But just a quick introduction from me, and then I'll hand over to Helen. So I'm an academic clinical fellow in neurosurgery in Leeds. So I'm a neurosurgical trainee, and I have 25% of my time dedicated to continue research. PhD-wise, I submitted my thesis in April, and I'm just planning the viva, so I'm kind of right in the middle of the exiting phase and planning the next phase. My research was about applied health research, looking at medtech to improve surgical care in developing countries primarily, but with relevance to any healthcare system, I hope, including the NHS. So I'll hand over to Helen to give us an introduction and then crack on with her first core principle.
Brilliant, thanks, Will. Will, can you just go? Oh, thank you. I was going to say go on mute, and you have. So welcome, everybody. My name's Helen Walthaw. I'm currently a Director of Nursing Research at Oxford University Hospital Trust. I have a role within the trust that is about developing research capability and capacity for nurses, midwives, AHPs, pharmacists, and healthcare scientists. So all professions other than medicine. Part of my role is to work with our BRC in Oxford, and so I work within the NIHR through the BRC, but equally within a trust trying to develop capability and capacity. And I unfortunately exited my PhD quite a few years ago, and so what I'm coming with you today is some experience of been through that side and supporting people that are coming up to that. I'm a very experienced PhD supervisor with a number of completions, so I'm just going to give some of that aspect, as Will is given the aspect of he's in it now. And so the first thought we thought would be useful for you to just think about is, when do you start thinking about afterwards? And so what we thought we would just throw in is our wisdom of when you need to really start thinking about what is going to happen in that postdoc period. So the thinking of exiting that thesis. And so my experience for people that are not medical practitioners, in the main, they do their doctorate part-time. We have probably a split of about 10% that do full-time and about 90% do part-time. If you're full-time, so primarily over 3 years, you need to be starting thinking about what afterwards by the end of your second year. So when you're in your second year, coming towards the end, you need to start having discussions with your supervisors and colleagues within practice or within the university about what you want to do and where you want to go afterwards. If you're part-time, the majority of that time is 5 years to take a part-time doctorate for submission to the thesis. Therefore, you need to really start thinking about it about the start to the middle of year 4. And so it really is about not waiting till the end. It is really about, where do I need to start thinking about exiting that doctorate, and the timescale that is the most appropriate for you. Elizabeth, do I call you Liz or Elizabeth? Can you just go on mute? Sorry.
Lizzie is good.
Lizzie, are you able to go on mute? Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
It's just we can hear the baby. So I'll just pass over to Will to give his opinion before we then open it up to people.
Yeah, thanks so much, Helen. I mean, it's great to have your insight from the many people that you've helped successfully exit the thesis. I mean, I guess one of the things I was thinking about while you were talking is just that while there's kind of general broad principles, no two theses and no two researchers are exactly the same. So it's about your individual circumstances, your individual research interests, and the environment that you're in or that you hope to be in as well, which is really, really important. Directly to answer the question in terms of when to start thinking about it, from my point of view, I try and think about things. I don't think you can think about it too early. I think obviously supervisors might be like, you don't need to worry about that just yet. Let's focus on this, and obviously that's important. But for me personally, I found it helpful to figure out kind of my training, like surgically or clinically, about how I'm going to fit in. Where would I fit in the PhD? Where would I potentially fit in the postdoc? Or do I want to take more time out of training, or do I want to do something else? So I think there's quite a lot of dynamic elements to think about. So I would think about it yourself as early as you can, and have explore ideas and speak to other people at different stages on the journey. But then I absolutely agree in terms of the actual hard timelines of when you really need to start focusing your supervisors or potential future supervisors on that. The timelines that Helen gave, I think, are absolutely spot on. So as it's quite a small group, I don't know if Will or Lizzie have any thoughts or comments on that, or what stages they're
at. Sure. So I'm an MB PhD student currently, so I'll have done my PhD before I qualify. So I guess I'm thinking if I want to continue with academic side of things, I'm not entirely sure how that works. I mean, I know, obviously I won't need to do a PhD again, but I think there are certainly these NIHR programs that were discussed earlier that would be relevant. I don't know how things might be different, I guess, for me having done a PhD, how I might want to go about doing things. I guess that's something I'm interested in.
Yeah, I don't know if on to that point, if it's useful just to mention right now. So I did my PhD early in my training during foundation training, as you know, Will. Sorry, everyone, me and Will know each other from a previous project. So you can still join the integrated academic training program, the IAT from NIHR. You can still apply for AFP or SFP as it is now, and also ACF, and use that time to finish off bits of your PhD, maybe publish papers or do extra experiments, and indeed plan for that next stage, whether it's another fellowship, a clinical lectureship, an advanced fellowship, whatever it might be. So you can still certainly do that. You don't need to go for an ACF only to get a PhD, to put in a PhD application, which I guess is its primarily used normally. And it just depends. If you definitely want an academic career, then just being part of a program that gives you that time is really helpful, I think. Lizzie, I don't know if you've got any insights or thoughts on what we've said so far. Oh, I think
yeah, she's just put a comment that
yeah, fine. Helen, I'll hand back over to you. I don't know if you've got any more reflections on that, or if we should move on to the second principle.
Yeah, I think some points Will mentioned will be follow up. So if I move on, if that's okay.
Sounds great.
So I do think one thing that we really need to think through as we're exiting the thesis is mentorship. And I think a lot of students feel that their mentorship should really align with their supervisors. It doesn't need to, because very often a supervisory team is put together for a particular purpose rather than for your career in its longevity. So I think what you need to be really clear of from a mentorship point of view is who, if it's part of your supervisory team, do you really link and get on and trust with that person? Because I think what is really key in the world of academia as a clinical academic or within a university as an academic, what you have to really do with a mentor is trust them. Because what is really quite key, it's a bit of a rat race out there, and it's very often it's one against another. And so you want to be really comfortable that you're sharing your ideas of postdoc with someone that you trust, and that they will support you in the right way, rather than take you down a path and I'm painting a really poor picture here, but the wrong way for their benefit rather than your benefit. And so I do think mentorship is really key. mentorship doesn't have to be where you work. It doesn't have to be your supervisory team. It could be someone that you've met at a conference that you really align to, could be someone that you've worked clinically that you really align to, or an old university professor that you've worked with. But just think through who that mentor should be for you to move your career forward. Over to you, Will.
Yeah, I think that's great.
I completely agree with that too. Sorry, I think I'm back.
I think you're muted.
I would completely agree with that too. Am I on now?
Yeah,
It says I
we
should
can hear
be.
you. Yeah, we can hear
Yeah.
you, Lizzie.
So I completely agree with that about finding the mentorship. The other part and parcel, which I think is quite often forgot, is finding a sponsor. So it's close like a mentor, but a mentor can be someone who's junior to you. It can be someone who's a peer, someone who you can bounce ideas off, who can support you to make your own decisions. But what I think can be really important, especially in academia, is the power of a backer.
Yeah.
So if you were in a corporate industry, it would be who's the money, and in a surgical mindset, it's who's the consultant, who's the department you want to work with, who is the person who's going to back you to then bring your ideas into the department. Because at the end of the day, as someone within a department of surgery, you need people to buy into it, and people are very good at following bosses. So whether it's the lead nurse practitioner, if you're an AHP, or whether it's the lead consultant, if they buy into you, others will buy into you. And it also really helps your plan of where you're going in life as well. If you've got a department that you gel with, that's almost the first and most important thing, is finding the sponsor. And ideally they should be someone, from a research point of view, it's helpful for them to be two rungs or three rungs ahead of you, so you're not one of many, you're one of their important people, and you're backing them as much. They're getting something out of the relationship as well. So I found that when I was an SHO, it was a senior registrar who's a research minder who's now a consultant, and I'm a mid registrar. So I think that for me, I think if you're an MD PhD, Will, that was the thing that I didn't know that I had to my advantage, and now in hindsight, and still do think is the thing that's kept me within a clinical academic track. And it's the bit where I'm kind of trying to struggle now, because I'm now trying to find the person to sponsor. I'm trying to find who will be my Robin to my Batman.
That's great. I mean, I couldn't really put it better. Thanks very much. It's really good. I think one analogy I like to use or think about sometimes is that, like, if I was a company or something, I would have a board of advisors or board of directors. So I think that your analogy of having multiple mentors at different levels that provide different things to you and that you can provide different things to is really, really important. And indeed, like, having mentors that are kind of more junior to you clinically or academically, your level, and different levels above is really, really critical. Trying to find that balance is a good skill to develop. And having the right mentor just makes your life so much more fun and successful as well, which I think is really important.
Next,
cool.
do you want me to do the next?
Yeah.
So the next bullet point is really thinking about that postdoc period. So I think in a clinical academic role, what is really quite key is that you get some funding in that postdoc period, because if you look at the literature, a lot of people drop out of clinical academic careers in that early postdoc time frame because they don't know where to go, hence why mentorship is so key. But equally, you get into a clinical role and you're full-time on call, etc., and you do not have time for research. So what is really key is that you look at how you will get that postdoc funding that will give you time out to enable you to move forward on your research ideas. Now, Will mentioned this earlier, whether that might be a personal fellowship, or actually that might be a research grant that enables time for you to be bought out within that grant. So as an example, it may well be, I mean, we are on an NIHR incubator, but actually, as you all know, NIHR offer a lot of funding, but it is highly, highly competitive. And therefore, really what you want to think through is what are the other areas that align to what I'm interested in that I can apply for that offer fellowships. So it may well be, if you're working in cardiac surgery, British Heart Foundation offer personal fellowships, or it may well be you're aligning to global health from a surgical point of view, as an example Will was. It might be Wellcome that you look to apply for, MRC equally. But if you look at the personal fellowships and don't put all your eggs in one basket. If you've not been a PI or a CI previously, which the chances are you may not have been, it might be worth thinking about, I'll apply for a research for patient benefit grant, which is up to about 250, well, about 200,000 at the moment. That gives you an opportunity to show your worth in that postdoc period and to get time for you to develop ideas from your doctorate moving forward. So just think through how you will get funding to support you to enable to get onto that first run of the ladder as a postdoc, because the chances are, if you don't, you could not get onto that rung, and therefore you will find it hard to move along the academic route.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I'm not going to add too much, but I think just from a funding application point of view, like, it's a really important skill to develop. It's something that I'm still developing, and it's important to get used to rejection and failure, because it's much more likely that you will fail, actually, even if you have a really good project person in place. But yeah, exactly what I did was I tried to find potential funders that I'd like to go for after my PhD and download their application forms now, even with no intention of applying for maybe a year or longer. And indeed, if people were willing to send me their previous successful applications, then basically I tried to just pretend as if I was applying now, filled it in as a mock on my computer. And that's a really powerful way to identify the gaps that you're going to have. So how do I focus and target my progression, my skills and outputs? I need that systematic review in that area, really, otherwise they're not going to do it. So that focuses your effort and time. So I found that really helpful, and I'm doing exactly what you said, Helen. I'm looking at RFPB now, and hopefully put in at the end of this year or early next year is my plan.
And just following on from that, I'm not sure if all of you have accessed the research design service, but actually the RDS, which is in all regions, offer really good support for your application, whether that's RFPB or a personal application. Now, they're funded by NIHR, but they actually offer that mentorship and that feedback for any healthcare research funder. So Wellcome or MRC or BHF, they would support you. And it's really good because you will have independent people that are looking at your application form that don't know you. And that critical eye is really key, because they will give you feedback because they've seen so many through. And so they know what is expected in any section. And as Will said, it is really key that you look at where your gaps are. But sometimes you can't see your own gaps because you're in it for yourself. You're living it and breathing it. So what is quite key is that you have an independent person that knows the system that can give you that feedback on your gaps, because potentially they may see it and you can't see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And things like you might need a PPI working group meeting, or you might need things that take some time to organize, analyze, and then write the report for. So to know that in advance is really helpful. If you open the grant application with like 6 weeks to go, like we all do, there's just no way unless you've done that. But yeah, I don't know if Will and Lizzie have any comments on I guess funding and kind of securing that next level.
Yeah, I'm still working on it. I mean, I've got two small starter seed grants, and I think that was kind of where I went with it. What I found difficult. So I'm applying to come back out back into clinical academic training now. I'm applying for a clinical lectureship currently. I finished my PhD in 2018, and so I've been full-time clinical and also 2 maternity leaves in that since then. And I've found it very difficult to carve out time now that there are these. where I used to be able to use my evenings and weekends for my research as essentially a hobby. Now I just can't.
No.
And so that was the thing that changed, was needing the clinical lectureship, even though I have traditionally also perceived it as looked at negatively by my purely clinical colleagues, as you've chosen to give time out of learning your skill, your craft. I just need it, otherwise the research is going to go. It's going to be the third wheel that gets dropped.
Yeah.
So I looked for seed funding, and what I found difficult was finding funding that I was eligible to apply for as a fully clinical person that wasn't, but not a consultant. There was, so I found funding from the Royal College of Surgeons where they actually, it says consultant on the form, but if you read the small print, they say or trainee postdoctoral. So there were a couple that I had to read through a lot of stuff to find pots of money that I was eligible for as a non-integrated academic clinician, as a fully clinical one at postdoctoral level. So that was, I think, the tricky thing, and that's where supervisors and mentors came in handy, because they said, well, have you thought about these pieces? Have you thought about those? And so I essentially have cobbled together about 50k to start something. But yeah, I think you're sort of protected a bit from that if you're in that clinical academic track, because you're eligible for so much more, both in terms of the time and you've got the time to spend it.
Yeah. I do think based on
the Royal College of Surgeons do have this little thing, and then you can start showing yourself a track record of, even though you're struggling to find the time, you still managed to do what you can with what little you've got. Because they all put on their applications, oh, well, you're judged commensurate with what you could have achieved. You're judged relative to your stage. So if you haven't got time, but yet you still managed to do even something, I'm hoping that's going to be useful.
Absolutely. The other thing, just following on from that, Lizzie, I don't know if either of you work in NHS trusts that are affiliated with the BRC. So it depends on the training lead of your BRC, but our BRC offers postdoctoral funding that gives you a bridge. And so it's always worth thinking about BRC or ARCs in your area, because they do have pots of money. Now, both of you are medics, so you're slightly disadvantaged sometimes, I think, because I think they think medics have it right. And so the professions that don't at the moment are the nurses, midwives, etc. And I'm saying that being one of them, so I'm not putting anyone down. But actually, I think sometimes, Lizzie, what you've identified is there isn't that support for the people, even in medicine, if you're not on a track that everyone is on a track. And so if you do have strong links with a BRC or an ARC, then it potentially is worth just speaking to their training lead to see what is available for you.
Yeah, I tried that, and actually, so my BRC would be the GOSH one, and they were like, oh, yeah, we've got this catalyst year long. You can do. I don't want to step out of training entirely, which is what they were. The catalyst thing was saying, oh, well, you have to be 20% or less clinical, and I was sort of like, that's not really what I'm after. I'm after. I mean, my other option would have been to go less than full-time surgical training, and then use that time that was freed up to do research. But you're not allowed to do that for research. So I would have had to lie slightly and say that I was doing it for childcare points of view, and keep the childcare going and use the time for my research, which seemed a bit underhanded as well. And it would have lengthened my training, which the integrated academic training doesn't do.
No.
So it was sort of a very strange position to find yourself in, of like not eligible for anything. And Gosh BRC were very sympathetic, but didn't have any. They were like, you're eligible for these 3 things, which were all or nothings. Yeah, which isn't really what I was after as someone.
So could you, just out of interest, can you do in medicine, when you're on your academic training, can you do part-time research? So our BRC would offer you a year part-time to remain therefore in clinical, say 2 days, argument's sake, and then remain clinical for 3. Was that not an option for you?
No, the only option that they had was to do the percentage of full-time equivalent clinical work, like 20 to 40%. And I wanted it the other way around, really.
Yeah.
I wanted to spend a day or 2 a week doing it. And actually, I ended up being able to basically being because the department is one that I know so well, and again have sponsors within who know that I want to work, that I have the researchers on behalf of the department as much as for me. They informally jiggled my job timetable to give me more SPD sessions to use for it. So I created it informally. But I kind of was a bit like, I was there, but for the grace of God, that, you know, I could do that rather than have it all stall.
Well, I do. It's up to you, but I do.
It sort of showed to me the importance of backers more than anything else.
Yeah, but I equally do think that needs to be challenged, because the NIHR supports part-time. You know, you can even do lectureships part-time, you can do fellowships part-time, and so they shouldn't be saying it's only a full-time offer, especially with their EDI. You know, you're a female that's has potential to, you know, 2 maternity leaves. They would be, I think they'd go against their EDI principles. So I wonder whether it's worth just challenging it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think that they realize that, because I wasn't technically. So you're saying as someone who was working full time for a trust that has a BRC, I would come under their kind of protection, as it were, because my impression was that because I wasn't funded by any of them. Oh, really? Okay, well, I will challenge that then, because that was where I kind of thought that the options was because I was funded purely clinically.
No, so our BRC
and on a training program as well. So
well, our BRC offers if you work within a theme from that BRC. So as in clinically in the theme, you don't have to be employed by the theme. So if you, like, argument's sake, Oxford's got a respiratory theme. If you worked as a respiratory physician full time, you would be able to apply for that.
That's really interesting. I'll go away and have a think about that, actually, because that's really interesting. That's a nuance I'd missed, because which would be really also quite interesting. I think my colleagues who are in a similar position to me. So it feels like people step out of the training for PhDs, and that's kind of now getting to be more a well-trodden thing. But when they come back in, it's sort of, well, there you go, you tick that box.
Yeah.
The PhD was the goal, was the end point. And now you can get on with becoming a fully clinical consultant. And it's sort of, but that's a waste of all that training and effort if it's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, and a lot of the reason it stalls is for exactly that reason, isn't it? It's just, well, now what do I do?
Yeah, exactly.
But if I...
And Will, I know that you're still, you know, you're more early on in your career, but I think that just for you specifically, it would be useful to start thinking about small project grants, unicorn type funding things that you could apply for to maybe help do sub-studies or specific parts of your PhD, or targets for what you might want to apply if you end up doing an AFP or an ACF. Every time you write a grant application, you get better at writing grant applications, same with writing articles. So you just need to write, and that will help mitigate the poor success rate that we all, that's just in the world. And even if you've got just even if you've got £500 to run a PPI event or something like that, just having something in that section on your CV or on future grant applications, it's almost a bit like a domino effect. Like once you get that £500 grant, you're much more likely to get that £2,000 grant, then you're much more likely to get that £10,000 grant, and then so on. And when you get one of the big ones, you're then much more likely to get bigger ones. So. But you just every successful grant application, behind it there's about 10 failures. Depends on what area of science you're in or what work you're doing. But
and also the irony of the same, it's like personal taste. You know, you can write a grant application that you think fits perfectly within their brief, and they'll write back saying, no, this is worthless. I recently submitted exactly the same grant to a different funding body, and the feedback was, this is the best we've ever seen, this is amazing. You know, it was just sort of, you almost want to copy and paste one and send it to the other, going, because it's just it's exactly the same, and it fits the personal taste and flavor of one funding body reviewer more than another, and it doesn't mean you're any less.
Absolutely. No, this is really, really helpful. I mean, the funding is such a key issue. We could, there's a lot to say about it, but I'm just conscious of time, Helen. I know you've got 2 extra awesome points to cover, I think.
Yeah, so the other thing, just following on from what we've talked about, is I think collaboration is really key, because individuals do not achieve anything, whereas you achieve an awful lot with a team approach. And that collaboration, you know, national and international, is quite key. And I think very often when you're just getting your PhD and potentially still on training, you think, who am I to email so and so who's a world leader in X? Because you just think, I can't do that. Well, you can, and you need to really connect with collaborators in your sphere of research to get your name known. And a really good social media platform is Twitter to do that.
Yeah, absolutely, couldn't agree.
Can I ask a question?
I think when you do your applications and you go for your fellowship interviews and stuff, one of the slides you'll have, or one of the big sections, would be how have you built your collaborative team? What have you done to network and create that? Elizabeth, I do want to hear what you have to say first. That's okay, but I know also that Will has done a lot in interdisciplinary collaboration. So when you're thinking about random disciplines that might have nothing immediately to do with what you're doing, how do you identify the key individuals in those disciplines that might be able to help, even if it's learning how they do something in that environment that you could apply to your own research? Sometimes that looks really cool on an application. You know, you've taken something from, I don't know, the military or Formula One, and now you're applying that to how we do something in healthcare. That is sometimes really, really cool. But I'm sorry, Lizzie, over to you.
I was going to ask how about people's thoughts about collaborations within the department. So there's this sort of flip sides of the same coin, that you're expected to demonstrate on forms going forward for postdoctoral research and then for team leader stuff. The emphasis shifts onto being a leader. So it's all how can you demonstrate independence? And that's something that I've sort of struggled with. And I think, you know, again, my mentor, who I work very closely with, has struggled with as well, is how do we differentiate each other from each other? Because we dovetail our stuff on purpose, because it helps us achieve more as we're both full clinicians and we're trying to have a research footprint. And the only way that we can seem to get it to work is by essentially job sharing the research. But that seems almost like a frowned upon thing on forms, because one of our main critique is, but you're one and the same. You're not different, you're not independent of each other, you're not independently leading. So it's kind of difficult, because in a clinical environment, yes, you can only achieve so much by yourself, and you need others to help carry you forward. But there's this dichotomy of needing to demonstrate independence.
I think what is key about that is you can demonstrate leadership and independence in so many different ways. You could lead a paper, you could lead a grant application, you could lead a PPI. So I think you need to think through how you can show that leadership in a very broad contextual way, rather than just I'm leading a research project. I think when you're looking at developing, I'm not sure if you all know about the VTI framework, but the VTI framework is about research, and research is developing. It's got 4 domains. One is leadership, and actually that gives you some really good clues of how you demonstrate leadership, and it is from pre-doc right through to prof level. There's so many phases at the top. So if you're thinking, oh, I haven't achieved that, well, the far right one is prof, so you wouldn't achieve that now. So look down at number 3. Am I hitting number 3? If I'm hitting number 3, then you're where you need to be. So I think you just need to shape it out individually, and it doesn't matter you're the same clinically. I think you just need to show leadership in different ways and look at it in a broader contextual way, rather than just that.
Okay. Sort of take ownership of different bits of it, lots of little different bits adding up to one thing, rather than okay, that's a good way of thinking of it.
Well, I don't know if you have any comments or thoughts on that. No worries if not.
No, not really, nothing to add.
No worries. Okay, so I think think that's a really good point, collaboration. And then the final point we wanted to cover.
Yeah, the final thing just to say is you really need to think as you're, and you might think this is too early, but think ultimately, where's your journey going? Is your journey staying within an NHS and working up a clinical academic, or is it going within a university and looking at either a full-time academic post or a clinical academic from a university perspective? Because in a way, they're different routes and the expectations are different depending on where you work, what the trust is that you work. And so I think from a medical school point of view, because you're all medics, you haven't got the problem, because medical schools are all of the same. You know, they all do research and they're all very strong on the ref, but actually the trusts are different and the emphasis of the trust potentially is different. So just think through how you want your journey to go, whether it is NHS or HEI.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important point. I think we've just been told we need to go back to the main stage, but just, yeah, final thought then. I think, there's always a balance between so you do want to try and have a think about what you want from your career life and your endpoints. So for example, for me, I would like to be an academic consultant and therefore have an academic clinical job plan, which is very difficult in lots of specialties, but it's probably no more so than surgery, if I say so myself, just because it's such a craft-based specialty, certainly in medicine. And therefore you need to have a think about how you're going to do that, what you're going to have to sacrifice to do that, what are the different routes to get there, and have plans about your preferred route, but then have 3 or 4 backup plans, or at least they don't have to be fully formed, but at least ideas about what you might do if A doesn't work, what you're going to do, because the chance of everything going perfectly is low. But your chance of getting to where you want to go without a plan is almost impossible. So you do need to have a plan, but multiple backups. So I think we should go back to the main stage so that we don't cut out of the keynote talk yet. We're being told to do that. And then I think we're going to do a summary and come back with the roundtable discussion outcome after that, I believe. Is that right, Helen?
Yeah.
Great. Guys, thanks so much for your contributions today in the audience. Good luck with your PhDs now, or academic work and careers moving forward. And Helen, thank you so much for sharing your principles and insights. It was awesome, and it's great to meet you finally.
Yes. Take care, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks.
That went all right.
Yeah, that was good. I think we've still got, I don't know if we've got someone watching. There's two out of 20, and then it says 3 eyes. I don't know if that's an organizer.
Yeah, it might be.
We can have a chat. We're not going to talk about anything controversial or confidential.
So
I thought that went well.
Yeah, I thought it went well.
Yeah, thanks very much.
I thought Lizzie offered some really good insights, actually.
Yeah, it was really, really interesting to hear, and it was quite good because we had Will, who was a medical student still doing his PhD. We had me, who just a trainee but just finishing their PhD. Lizzie, who's already finished but is a more senior trainee in navigating that really difficult bit that you highlighted, and then yourself, who's got this kind of overall view and you've managed lots of different PhDs. So I think it was really, I find it really interesting myself.
So I'm aware we're being recorded still. So shall we just feedback the 5 points?
I think so. I think let's feedback the 5 points, and then if you wanted to throw in any contextual tidbits about what Lizzie's experience or whatever, then feel free to do that. Yeah,
lovely. So I'll see you in that session whenever it is.
Yeah, I was just having a look at my emails. It says insight into roundtable discussions 12:30 to 12:40, but that I don't know how long that leaves for the keynote.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not sure
Let me just see if I can get the program. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I've got 12:40 to 3:10 for panel discussion and insights.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Sorry. Okay, that sounds great. Yeah, I should be able to join for the first bit.
Yeah.
But as I said, I might have to jump off. So
Yeah, that's fine. Well, you lead it, and then if you need to go, and then I'll just pick anything up.
okay, sounds good. Thanks very much.
Brilliant. Thank you. Take care.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.